Welcome to Deploying Office 365 ProPlus Customer Panel. My name is Michael Atala. I'm with the Office team in Redmond, Washington at Microsoft headquarters, and I am here to facilitate a conversation with a bunch of your peers in the industry sitting up on stage with us, representing 3 customers who have gone down the Office 365 journey or are going down it with us today. I'm going to largely get out of their way and let them talk to you. But I want to provide a little bit of context on why we're here and why we think this is important, and then I'm going to step off the stage. I'm throw some questions up for these 3 to answer, and then open the floor up for you to ask questions to them as well. The first thing that I kind of want to cover before doing that is a little bit of why Office 365 is exciting and important for Microsoft. We're going to have plenty of opportunity to hear why it's exciting and important for the 3 customers that I have here with me today, but I wanted to give you some context on why we're excited about it. An interesting challenge that we've faced over the years with Office in general and all of our infrastructure services associated with them, like SharePoint and Exchange, Office Communication Server, now Lync, now Skype, is the reality of what non-concurrency does to us from a development perspective. So as an engineering team, if we cannot understand the currency of the capabilities that you have in your infrastructure, meaning what the newest version of applications and services you have in place are, we can't build against that environment. We have to assume the least common denominator. We have to assume that if we've supported Windows XP for the last 10 years, you might still be running it. If we support Exchange 2003 still, or 2007, you might still be running it. Therefore, the newest and latest innovation we can build and bring has to assume those versions of the product. We can't do breakthrough things. We can't do breakthrough things if you can't assume currency. And so one of the things that, as a guy who's been at Microsoft 13 years and has been in the Office division for the last 8, that excites me the most about Office 365 is that in that environment, we can do really breakthrough things. We can change things more rapidly. We can be more agile with innovation. We can bring capabilities that work across the capabilities of the services, such as what you saw, some of the demos that you've seen, or maybe some sessions you've seen on what we're doing with Delve on top of the Office graph, and some of the org analytics that Julia White demoed during the Gurdeep's keynote on yesterday morning. Those things simply are hard to deliver, if not impossible, in an environment where we don't understand currency. So from a pure tech geek engineering perspective, it is an amazing platform to build on. And it will bring more value and more innovation to you more rapidly in the end. That's my high level. Why is it so exciting and important? Why are we so focused on Office 365 at Microsoft? It's really because we believe we can do just a ton more with it. So that being said, moving from a traditional IT environment, which I also grew up in, I started as a developer 20 plus years ago. I worked in IT. I deployed NT 351 and 4.0 and 2000, et cetera, Exchange. I did the PTOS migration. Anybody know what that is? PTOS migration, Platinum Exchange 5.5 to 2000 migration. So I've lived the infrastructure side of this. And I know that it's not so simple just to say, hey, look, this is better, come here. And so Office 365 has some real scary things associated with it. Some are myths, some are real. Some are real challenges, that is, and some are perceived challenges. So what we want to do today is sort of talk through how 3 customers, 3 peers of yours in the industry, in the world, actually addressed some of those challenges, risks, and how they have progressed or are still progressing in their own deployment. I have some questions that I know are common ones we hear that I'm going to throw their way, and then I'm going to give you all a chance to ask the same questions. But I want to start by allowing these 3 to introduce themselves and their companies, and then I'm going to jump into some of the questions. So please, why don't you give it a shot and give it started. Marcus.
Okay, so I mean, despite the video you just saw, so Henkel is we are a global company. We are 47,000 employees, doing 16 billion revenue a year. I hope you used one of our products daily. I'm sure you have done this morning, maybe, because one of our product group is beauty care, so Schwarzkopf or Dial here in the US. And I hope you all wash your clothes with our laundry products. They're very good. And quite sure you drove by a car, by a bus, or by a plane, or you're using a mobile phone, which are all using our adhesives products. So this is the biggest group inside Henkel, adhesives. So yeah, that's about me. I'm responsible at Henkel for the whole workplace strategy worldwide.
Hi, I'm Michelle Franklin. I represent Allstate Insurance, which I think probably most folks are at least familiar with. We're one of the largest U.S. insurers, so auto, home, life, all of that good stuff. Within Allstate, I'm responsible for the productivity tools team, which includes Office and some other products.
I'm Dave Ark. I'm responsible for the global infrastructure within TE Connectivity. We're the least known $14 billion company on the planet. How many of you know about TE Connectivity, excluding the two guys from my team here? Yeah, right. So we make electronic components and connectors. So if you drove a car, a bus, a train, there are electrical impulses that go in that device. We make all the connectors in that market space. We're in your washer and dryer. We are specialists in engineering products that are lightweight and work in harsh conditions. So we make connectivity happen.
Thank you, all three of you. I wanted to, before I jump into some questions that are a little more specific to deployment, I wanted to sort of help the folks in the audience get a sense for why you started down the journey of moving to Office 365. Separate from the deployment challenges you faced or the issues that you took on, why go down this path in the first place for each of your organizations?
Okay. Back in 2002, we concluded an enterprise agreement with Microsoft, and we went into hibernation mode. So that meant Office 2003 was our most current version of Office in most cases around the world. And as we got into the 2013 timeframe, we realized that's not a good place to be. Microsoft did announce the end of life for that product as well as some others. And we decided that we had to take some action, but more importantly, we were going through a transition at TE Connectivity that we were establishing a digital advantage program. So really trying to drive a new way of doing engineering and removing paperwork, digital marketing. But in the digital workplace area, which I was responsible for, we wanted to make the digital workplace an advantage for us from a hiring perspective. And that meant having modern tools, better collaboration capabilities, and much improved collaboration for our mobile users as well. We adopted what I think you heard in the keynote yesterday, the concept that work is something you do, not a place that you go. And so we wanted to make sure that across the multitude of devices we had, that our strategy was ready to support that. And that led us into an Office 365 agreement with Microsoft to accomplish that for a base of about 40,000 knowledge workers.
Michelle?
Thank you. So for Allstate, the scope of our project for Office 365 was actually around our agency force and their support staff. So it was not our enterprise users at this time. So we have about close to 50,000 agents and their licensed support staff and unlicensed support staff all across the country. And they were actually on a wide variety of operating systems, Microsoft Office platforms, just everything under the sun. So the main driver for us was to get that large agency force onto some common platforms and some common tools.
Marcus?
Yeah, I mean, similar to these guys. We had Office 2003, and I always mention to my team that's not a version number, that's a year, to really make people clear that it's a 10-year-old version we had in the beginning of 2013. In addition to that, we were heavily using Lotus Notes. Great. Oh, still one user? Good luck. We've done it. No, but seriously, I mean, I'm an old IBMer, so I've been 10 years with IBM, so for me it was really heartbreaking to see how Lotus Notes goes down the road. And so we had to make a decision on Office because we had no enterprise agreement. We saved a lot of money the years before, but now we had to do something. In addition, we had Lotus Notes. Then we had Same Time. We call it Sometime. Says everything. And so we had really a huge thing to do. And now we had plan A. Okay, let's upgrade to Office. Let's do the newest Lotus Notes version, and let's get Same Time better. And we had the plan B. And the plan B was then Microsoft came along and said, hey, what about Office 365? And let's move to the cloud. And it took really 3 or 4 months as a decision process to make that decision. And that's quite unusual for a company, for a German company. We do things quite detailed, so like risk assessments and all that stuff. But it was, for us, really a no-brainer. We've been in a perfect situation. I always describe that like the 9 or 8 planets in one row. you have in this movie every 5,000 years. That was the situation we had at Henkel. So we had a perfect fit. We had huge stuff to do. Then we had Office 365. It fits perfectly. And yeah, that was the reason why we decided to go Office 365. And so far, good choice.
So far, so good. That's good. We'll actually get to some of the more detailed questions around so far, so good. But I think a starting point for the conversation, at least based on all the conversations I have with customers broadly, is how did you overcome the thing that everybody is first dealing with in their organization as they advocate for move to cloud services, which is the perceived risk of cloud services. And I think, each of you has a slightly different situation in that perspective. So I'd love to just walk through a little bit of, and let me do this because I have an interesting slide. We actually did some research. These are all the different ways that customers that we've talked to at Microsoft from a research report quantified and identified why they think they can't go to the cloud. So basically everything is why you can't go to the cloud. I mean, this is sort of IT on that pie chart right there. So I'm interested, as you faced internal challenge or advocacy, what were the major issues and how did you think about them or overcome them? And please, Marcus, give it a shot.
I mean, so each situation is different. So we had a different starting point as you may have. We've been outsourced partly already. So that's a different starting point. When you want to move to the cloud and you've done it so far in-house, you have a different discussion. That discussion did not occur for us. But what did occur to us is the whole risk and security concerns. So people came up and saying, oh, wait. And you may remember summer 2013, this big news regarding this NSA stuff. That hit us in the middle of the decision process. So we had to do really good risk assessment. But at the end, finally, because we've been on a data center with IBM before, and now we're talking about a data center with Microsoft. Okay, there's the internet. It was not there before, but from that point of view, for us, it was a clear recommendation that we can go so for each and every user, and yeah, it happened.
Maybe to David next, just because I think the comparison of Allstate and T is interesting. David, you and I talked a little bit about how you were thinking about risk, and I think maybe it differently than this pie chart would suggest. You had a different view of how Office 365 would help or hurt.
Yeah, our security leader and I were talking about the risk of moving to Microsoft's cloud and abdicating responsibility for managing a lot of the environment. And he said, we've got some good security in place internally. We only have a few people doing that, and really not a lot of people dedicated to doing that. Microsoft has to make a lot of investment in security and making sure that this goes well. They're going to do it better than we're doing it. So as highly as we might think of ourselves as IT professionals, we know that Microsoft's got people that are dedicated to protecting the environment here, and as a full-time job and a full-time program, it really is important for Microsoft to protect the assets very well. So we actually feel like we're taking a step up in our security profile by coming here. We recognize mistakes can happen and bad things can happen, but if a bad thing happened to TE Connectivity, we would all not be happy about that. You probably might read about it someday in the news. If a bad thing happened to Microsoft in this space, they will never hear the end of it. I mean, how many of you know the Targets and the Sony names when you think about those things right now? That's a reputation crusher that sticks with you. So we recognize that Microsoft doesn't want that kind of press, and we know that they're doing the right things to avoid being front and center. So we think we've taken a step up in our security profile by actually moving to the cloud, which is maybe a little counterintuitive.
And thank you, David. I think as we look at Allstate, you're sort of in a position of having almost a dual situation. You're sitting here with this tightly managed enterprise, and what you and I discussed as the sort of the wild west of insurance agents all over the world. Mm-hmm. So how did those two different conversations go internally as far as risk and perceived risk?
Yeah, so for us, again, our enterprise deployment is on-premise. It is not something, we do not have a cloud presence with Office at this time. So when we were looking at trying to deploy Office to our agencies, again, as I mentioned earlier, they're independent business owners. So they control their own technology. They have any version of an operating system, any version of Office that they've kept in there for however long. So for us, going to Office 365 was more of kind of corralling and controlling that and giving us a little more insight and governance into what they're doing. One clarification for us, though, is we are a hybrid implementation. So we do not have full cloud presence with our Office 365. We're using it predominantly for installation as well as license and subscription management, while still making sure that we're controlling the data because we are so highly regulated.
I think it's fascinating both that you're a highly regulated environment that was using cloud services to gain control,
Yes.
which is exactly the opposite that every piece of sort of perception research would suggest is happening in the moment. So I'm also fascinated, though, at how, and this is, I'm opening myself up for all the real risks that you've identified, but how is the conversation on the enterprise side going? Like, what do you think that will look like, and what are the risks that you face?
Yeah, so for the enterprise, I think what we're going to face, and we're still in very early stages of this, is, there's obviously just the nature of our business, a lot of risk analysis that needs to take place, a lot of legal analysis that needs to take place, making sure that we're really protecting personally identifiable information, client information, and things like that. So I think it's interesting, David, with what you're saying with counting on Microsoft to provide that level of security, and is that a better level than we can do in-house? I don't know. We're still really kind of exploring some of those conversations to see where we could potentially take our enterprise solution.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I think the thing that your agent scenario is a great analogy for is this growth of this bring your own device reality. It's just you have it in spades, your entire insurance agency model.
Well, and it's very interesting because, again, the Office 365 was one track of work in a much larger project for us. So for us, it was getting out into these thousands of agency offices and really giving them some more controlled choices of hardware, operating systems, obviously the productivity tools with Office, some other softwares like virus protection and things like that. So it was trying to kind of find that nice sweet spot where we could kind of get a little more control and insight into it while still letting them manage their business.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I think it's a fascinating case study, frankly. As we move past the why cloud and hey, there was a bunch of risks or perceived risks that we had to overcome, the next thing that I think most people would probably want to know is, okay, so how did it go, or how is it going? So each of you are somewhat different stages of deployment or post-deployment, and I think maybe, Michelle, while you have the mic, I think that you're the earliest, you're the least far along, you've started most recently on the deployment, so maybe starting with how is it going for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So far it's going well. So we're about halfway through our deployment. Again, we started deploying to our agencies and their users in August of 2014. So it's, hitting 50,000 people, 35,000 machines over about a little over a year's presenting a bit of a challenge. One thing that we did do a little differently while we're using a click-to-run installation, we are actually having our technicians carry the installation files on site when they do the installations. Because, again, we're going out countrywide. We have no idea what the internet connection speeds are, what download speeds are, and we don't want to have our agents with a significant downtime. So we've taken a couple of really unusual approaches to make sure that this goes smoothly. So far, everything's going well. I mean, there's a few little bumps in the road that, of course, we always identify. We've done tons of automation to make things a little bit easier in our world, limit the amount of management that we have to do, and just working through it each day. So we're, again, about halfway done.
Can you speak a little bit more to the automation that you've done?
Sure. So we have a little bit of an interesting situation where when we were identifying the data feed to populate our Office tenant, we had to really look at our data sources and identify the best one for us. The recommended one, of course, is Active Directory and using DirSync. That was something that was not going to work for us. So we actually found another data source in-house where AD was one of the feeds, but there were some other components also feeding into it. When we first developed that, it was a relatively manual process. It took one of my software engineers several hours a day, every day, to keep this maintained. So we were feeding the users into the tenant. We were collecting daily vectors on deletions and additions. Using PowerShell, he has actually gotten that process down to a couple of clicks a day, a couple of minutes, and it's seamless. So we get our adds, get our deletes, and we're done.
It's a good example, I think, of how just with a little bit of customization you can actually tailor this sort of coexistence and hybrid deployment, especially in the one that you've got going, which is an ongoing X number of users a day sort of deployment.
Absolutely. There's a constant churn in our agent support staff, so there's constantly a couple of hundred folks being deleted every day, a couple of hundred being added. So as we move into run the business mode, it was something really important to make sure we had that just as clean and as easy as possible.
And even through a third-party directory source in this
Yes.
case, you've managed to automate that through PowerShell, which is actually,
Yes.
I think, really, frankly, pretty exciting that you can have that kind of flexibility with the cloud. Marcus, you want to take the mic?
Yeah, I mean, for us, one of the biggest concerns we had in the beginning when we started the project was application compatibility. I mean, when you're changing a software which is 10 years old, you expect some bumps there, and there were some bumps. I mean, and we are talking 99% about Excel. So that's a real issue. We do not have issue with PowerPoint and Word. I mean, they are such some minor. It's Excel. And when you change Excel 2003 to 2013, there's an engine change between. So a lot of things to consider. And we had 1,500 global applications and thousands of unknown own programmed macros, which a business totally rely on. If this file
I assume
is
the
not
giggles in the audience are knowing giggles.
So if this file is not working, if this macro is not working, we are blind. So it's like statements like that. And we found a lot of these things, and therefore that was the biggest concern. So in the beginning, we took a lot of effort in the application capability stream, scan all these applications, ask the business owner, identify the business owner. I mean, it's not so easy always in such a big company, and then test and give them tools, processes that they can test themselves. I mean, we even had we call it a special force team in the back, where people could send in their macros, could send in their files, and we checked them for them. And we made them compatible. So that we got them back 2 days later and check. So we've done this a lot. But then also, like you, I mean, 45,000 users at the end. We did not know in the beginning how much we will have. So at the end, it turns out it was 45,000. And we had 4 months of deployment. So we've done about 1,000 a week, remote installations. Only for the field agents, which we have as well. We did a DVD installation. And we distributed the package, which was about 3.6 gigabyte to these users, which was a huge thing to do. And we started even 3 months earlier as a silent deployment to the PCs to get all the data there. And then we've done 1,000 a week with all the communication around, because it's a huge change. And we are not an IT company. We always forget that 99% of the users outside are not IT people. I mean, we are not an IT company, and we are changing a graphical user interface really, I mean, dramatically. Even if the people may use already a newer Office version at home, but it was a huge change. So this has also come along as I would say, as a big package here. And at the end, we had a very robust incident process, so that in case something happened during the installation, people call the help desk and they get immediate help. So that was key, because we knew that we cannot get everything up front and proactively, that there will be people who do not read any email or do not listen to any communication or whatever, and just be totally surprised that they can get a new Office package. It always happens, and it's unbelievable. But even for them, we got a very robust process in place. So they call the help desk, okay, you get help here, and that works really, really good. I mean, at the end, our target date was always end of April, 95%, and we hit that, really. At end of April 2014, 95% of all installations of all the machines were up to Office 2013. That was good.
Thank you, David. How about you, where you are?
So we weren't just upgrading Office 2003 when we started. So when we signed our contract almost 2 years ago, there was a lot of sales activity going on with Microsoft at that point. So kind of the bad news for us at that point was there were very few Microsoft experts available to join our account. So we kind of delayed for 3 or 4 months while we were getting an account team lined up from Microsoft to help. I think that situation is not a problem these days, but when we started, that was a challenge for us. But we were taking Windows XP out of our environment simultaneously, which in many cases also meant a hardware refresh. So we were trying to have all of those moons converge so that we didn't touch somebody 3 times. And we planned it out, tested our applications. About 98% of them were in pretty good shape and compatible with Office 2013. And then we said go, and in a 90-day window, we took virtually all of our environment from Office 2003 to Office 2013, and again, the operating system was up to Windows 7 or on tablets Windows 8, and that went extremely well. There weren't any applications that broke that we had tested. We had to take a few people back to Office 2010 because of application compatibility from the third-party vendors that weren't ready to support, but that went very well. So we've been established on Office 2013 for a while now. We cranked up the knob on Link so that we had more Link users. We had about 20,000 Link users before the migration, and then we took everybody up to Link. And now, Link is our most important collaboration tool. We're doing about 55,000 Link video meetings every month. And then there's the non-video meetings on top of that. So it's really been integrated into our collaboration space. We've now been working on email in the cloud, and in January we started a push to do that. We've now put 35,000 of our mailboxes up into the cloud, a few thousand more to go, and another couple months and we'll be done with that. We've started on OneDrive for Business. I haven't advertised it to anybody in my company yet, but by word of mouth, 8,000 people have moved up there and are using OneDrive, which is a good thing. We've got a marketing campaign that we've got going on that'll be coming out in May to tell people it's okay to use it and go ahead and do it. But the door opened an inch and 8,000 people jumped through it. We don't have plans for some of the other technologies at this point in the cloud. Link is an on-premise tool because we do make use of some of the voice technologies. So we've got to wait for Microsoft to be able to support that in the cloud before we can consider that. And SharePoint's one that we're still trying to determine whether we're going to go hybrid or not. We're not quite ready to make that jump.
So three, pretty different states of affairs across three different customers, which is, I think, the reality that we've become accustomed to at Microsoft is that this is just going to be a very personal journey for most folks, but there are a lot of commonalities. I think one of the places where commonalities become really important is in lessons learned. We've talked a little bit about some of the various things that you all have faced. I think, Dave, while you have the mic, one of the things we talked about is as you're doing mailbox migrations, I think calendar synchronization and consistency, and be as kind as you can. But in general, I want you to let these folks know what sort of challenges you really have faced.
Yeah, so from an Exchange 2003 environment on-premise to the cloud environment, we knew we couldn't take all 38,000 mailboxes or 40,000 mailboxes at once, so we knew we were going to have to stagger it. And then we started to do a little analysis because if you're in the cloud, your calendar is not fully viewable by someone with their mailbox on premise. So you can see free and busy, but that's about as far as it goes. So we started walking down our organizational structure from our CEO and his admin to his staff and their admins, and we had the spider web kind of diagrammed out, and we figured that when we moved the CEO, we would have to move 600 people within a really small window, like 2 days. We didn't really kind of anticipate that when we first jumped into this. We thought, in days gone by, you move from one Exchange server to another, you're just dragging mailboxes over and, presto. In this environment, it was different, and we had to think differently. And so we had to do a lot of planning around who goes when and what, who's an admin for somebody else's mailbox and who sends out mail on behalf of other people. And then you have to build those linkages before you send things out. The other lesson learned, I think, that was a big one for me, which I didn't anticipate going in, was around data privacy. Now, Marcus, living in Germany, knew all about that. TE is a global company. We're in 60 different countries. And I figured, well, we're just going to, we've got things lined up. Let's just go deploy. And then I talked to our data privacy officer, and he said, well, now we've got to go get explicit approval from some of our workers' councils across Europe and from many governments. I just got France's approval last month. I'm 21 months in. That's not 21 months waiting for the French government. Somebody said, well, they only work 30 hours a week. But some of that was on our part, getting things lined up and asking. And it's just taken a lot longer to get all those government agencies' approvals than I anticipated. With a data center in the U.S., the Microsoft data center here, we actually, at the time we signed, would have preferred to have gone to Europe. But Microsoft didn't recommend that and weren't ready for us to be housed in Europe. But so we're here in the U.S. and I have one more country I've got to get approval from yet, and No, Germany was early on with an approval, by the way. But don't underestimate the amount of time it's going to take to get those approvals.
Yeah, Marcus, do you want to jump in on maybe one of this, and then we'll go back to Michelle? Yeah,
because
related.
we've some Germans here. Are the Germans here? Yeah, I know. Oh, so in Germany, so we did a little bit differently because we had to go from Lotus Notes to Outlook, and we made a clear decision to use, and that's what in Germany we call the A40 principle. A40 is a highway in Germany, and instead, so they had to repair the highway. And instead of doing it like they normal doing, so the left lane and then right lane and all that stuff and all the issues, they just closed the highway, the complete highway, for 3 months. Instead of having this repair stuff for 2 years. And this was the first thing they have done 3 years ago as an experiment. They said, we have no idea if this will work or not, but people will find their ways. And they did. It was really a huge success because finished in 3 months instead of 2 years and all that stuff. And people, after a week, they found their ways, and traffic was okay. And they did it in the summertime where there's less traffic because 35 hours in Germany or something like that. So we had a lot of vacation. And we did a similar thing for Lotus Notes and Outlook. We just told the people, yes, there is no free, busy lookup. Take the phone. Call them. That's why we take this time as short as possible. But we will not invest in the interfaces, which may even not working. So we're just saying, yes, there could be colleagues which are still on Lotus Notes, and there will be colleagues already on Outlook. You can send them emails, so come on, no big issue. And if you have to make an appointment and you're not sure, just call them. It will enforce collaboration as well. So that went really well. People were aware, we communicated quite good, and that's also one thing I always can recommend there, as well as the principle that we start with a clean mailbox. So we told the people we will not migrate your mails. Full stop. You will start with a fresh mailbox on the next day. And 9 out of 10 people were saying, thanks for that. Really, really, thanks for that. That's the best decision ever.
Sounds like a magical day.
Yeah, no? I mean, yeah, it is, and it was. For me, it was great. I mean, it's only 1 day, then it's full again. But and also, we migrate calendar entries. To be fair, we migrated the calendar entries, and when we had issues, it was about calendar entries. Because, I mean, in Lotus Notes, if you do a repeat calendar entry for 40 Mondays without when it's full moon or whatever, and you migrate them to Outlook, they just crash. That does not work. You have to reset these things. So those were the issues we had. And yes, we did context, but no mail migration. Not even for our CEO or whomever. And everybody was supporting it on that, and that was really one of the best things we have done.
I think it's an interesting, that's one of the lessons learned that Microsoft ourselves, we're super familiar with. We live, most people around Microsoft tech have heard us use the phrase dog food quite a lot. We eat our own dog food, we run our own technology. We coexist in a state of constant hybrid across all the different ways we deliver Office technologies and across broader than just Office. So we've had moments of migration where in the same year you might move between an on-premises server to a new version of an on-premises server to a cloud-based mailbox to a managed mailbox all in the same year. So the calendar synchronization and dependencies around delegates and such are things that we've documented extensively in white papers and guidance just because we've lived it so closely. And we still live it because we still kind of live that constant dog food environment. Most organizations won't have to do it quite so frequently, but that's, hopefully we can help you along the journey. Now, Michelle, when we were talking, you had talked about one of the big lessons learned for you, which is totally unrelated to deployment technology, but more related to updates and roadmap and such, and so interested in that.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, so while I'm really jealous of the idea of a clean mailbox when I go to work tomorrow, that'd be awesome. One thing that we discovered as we were going through this was the pace at which Microsoft updates Office 365 through the cloud tenant. So, we have access, of course, to the Office roadmap. We try to stay current with it, but the pace of those drops and the pace of those changes requires us to have constant kind of monitoring of the updates that are coming down and making sure that the configuration settings that we want haven't been changed by a patch or a drop. So, from an engineering perspective, we're trying to keep a pretty close eye on that as well as the tenant health on an ongoing basis. and make sure that, if we had something turned off because we really needed it off, that it didn't get turned back on somehow. So that's been really interesting for us, is trying to make sure we understand what that update process is, the frequency of it, and as much as possible trying to get ahead of it. The other challenge with that, of course, too, is, because some of those updates are pretty quick, even though we have, some of the immediate updates turned off, is the user education. So if you come in one day and you see Link, and then you come in the next day and you see Skype, for example, if we're not prepared for that, then we've got a whole lot of folks that are calling our help desk asking questions. So we're really trying to, that's been a learning for us, is trying to get better at staying ahead of those automatic updates and making sure we understand what's coming down through the cloud and through the tenant for our users.
And that's a really interesting topic. I know there's a fairly new bit of information that started to come out of Redmond, which is around how the updating model for Office 365 ProPlus will adapt and change in the coming year to make it easier and more flexible for you to think about how to do updating. There was a session, and I'm going to look down. What was the session number if folks are looking for the deck? That's right. I'll call it on 2207. 2207 is a content deck about our new servicing model, the current and deferred branch model, that allows you to adapt your deployment of the subscription updates to monthly or 3 times a year models, so that you can do line of business testing in a more flexible way. I think when a lot of you started working on the early parts of the deployment, that wasn't really a model. So for Allstate, you were dealing with the monthly updates, and it's one of the reasons why the roadmap.office.com site was such an important move for us, so that you could have that 12-month
we have it bookmarked.
view. Yeah. The trailing and the trailing and future view, even features that we've talked about and have cut, are called out there, so that you can really try to adapt. But it's a great flag, because it is something that you live with in a state of constant innovation. We're accustomed to it too in hardware, right? We see new devices show up at a pace that is similar, so it's frankly put time to adapt to services moving that quickly as well. There is one sort of, I guess, maybe one big question that would be interesting for you all to take on, and you can answer this in whatever way you see fit, is what would you do differently? Like, all of you think it's going or has gone well. All of you had some issues, but you thought the risk was worth the outcome, or the work was worth the outcome. So if you got to restart now, what would you do differently? And I don't know, Michelle or Mark's going to give it a shot.
I've got it. So there's probably 2 things that I would probably do differently, and I'm speaking on behalf of one of my engineers for one of them. We would have made sure that our Active Directory data was a little bit cleaner up front, where we could have used things like DirSync, rather than some of the more manual, and then following it up with having to automate ourselves. I think that would have made our deployment itself a little bit easier. So that's probably one of the biggest ones. The other one is, because we are going out into the field, I think we've kind of had to be reactive at times. So it would have been nice to have had, and some of this is just project timelines. It's something all of us face. But having had maybe a little bit more time to be a little more planful with this, I think we've done a great job, but this is just one track of work in a very large program. So from an office perspective, we were just going 90 miles an hour last year, making sure this was ready, which it was, and we hit all the dates and everything went very successfully, but it was a little chaotic there for a while.
There were probably 2 things that I would point to doing differently, or wanting to do differently. First is we didn't put an overall project manager on the migration. We put some technology managers and said, go ahead and deploy, and it didn't work real well. And at the point, after some not so good results, we assigned a full-time project manager to this, like any other big project. Things came together, and we had a lot more success. So if I had that to do over again, I would throw an experienced project manager on this from the very beginning. The second thing was around our email migration, which I mentioned we started in January. We really kind of wanted to start about 4 or 5 months earlier than that, and close your ears, Mike. Microsoft tells you that the mailbox migration is a piece of cake. They got all the tools to do that. And they will probably tell you about a high percentage of the mailboxes that migrate successfully. That wasn't the case, at least not for us. And so, we were trying to make that a bulletproof process. And I think I would have probably sooner come to the conclusion that we want to do things differently in 2 ways there. One is, don't expect it to be 100%. And so what we did was we lined up our desk side support people in a position where they could control the rollouts, because they needed to touch probably about 25% of our migrated mailboxes to fix something. It might be a cache, it might be something about the Outlook configuration needed to be reset or something. And so we kind of hung on to that one too long, hoping for 100%, and then we kind of got good at doing it at 75% with some manual intervention. And then when we did, we've been able to go at scale, doing 8,000 a month. So I think that would have been something I would have done differently sooner. And putting the control into the desk side team's hands as to the scheduling was a big turn for us when we got there.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? I think you've referred to it as sort of the outside-in model.
Again, in days gone by, the exchange team, which is a small group of people, would move mailboxes from one place to another. Well, that wasn't going to be a successful formula going forward. So instead of that inside-out method, we went outside-in. So we took the hundreds of desk side support people and put them in control of the schedule, so they could submit names into a script that would get moved. The process that we've got from Microsoft moves 95% of the mailbox before the actual downtime occurs for the user, and then the desk side support person controls the triggering of the script then for the final 5%, which is where we see downtime, which is taking about an hour, sometimes 2 hours, depending on how many people we're migrating, of downtime for that user, including their mobile device. And so when we went to that outside-in model, put a lot more control in their hands, and they could get side by side with the user that was getting migrated. And then we had we had the 80% success rate, and then the extra 20% was done within an hour. So the end user really didn't notice a bad thing in that case.
That's fascinating. Marcus, do you want to comment on how?
Yeah, for us, so I mean, good thing is we had a program manager first in the beginning. It was me. And we had a dedicated team. That was also one of the key success factors, that we really have a dedicated team, 90 people involved. I mean, otherwise you cannot do it in such a short time frame. But what we would do differently for sure is network capacity. You can't have enough. I mean, that's just, for me, one conclusion out of this project. Sure, we calculated in the beginning, and we said, okay, where do we have to increase bandwidth and all that stuff? But at the end, we have to even done more than we expected us, because the consumption of network is increasing so rapidly and so big, and we really had to do a lot of investments there to keep up. Now we are good, but even now in the future we change the way we are budgeting our network costs. So instead of doing 10% plus each year, we're now going to 25%. Because we see that there's such a rapid increase of network bandwidth, and the usage of Link increased a lot. We have SharePoint. And similar as you, we did not even promote OneDrive because we were not sure regarding network. If 40,000 people just using OneDrive, and people now start to using that, and that all impacts the network, and differently than it has done it before. And that's one key thing I would do maybe differently, maybe concentrate more, because it gave us some headaches during the rollout, the network capacity. Yeah.
So I will throw one more question out at you before asking the audience to pepper you with their own questions, and that is sort of, now that you've been where you are in your deployments being different, what have some of the original either doubters, or how have some of the original perceptions around risk, danger, the user experience degradation, or the challenge around user training, how have some of those some myths, some real challenges, how have they panned out? How have individuals in your org that thought about those things as risk or reasons not to do the work, how have their perceptions changed? I'd love to understand the outcome in short.
I mean, when you had Notes before and Office 2003, and now we gave them a modern workplace, I mean, we got really great feedback. Quite honestly, even the people who were a little bit critic about that, now they're all really happy. I mean, I can really say that we got customer satisfaction really high in the 70-80%. We've done all the surveys in the project. And now also we're doing still, even the project is over, we're doing still a lot in change management. I mean, and this was one of the key success factors of the project, despite communication, was really change management. So invite the people. I don't know how often I was standing on a stage like that in front of 300-400 Henkel employees. Each week I've done 2 of these sessions. I travel around the world and I explain and explain and explain what are the changes to come. Now I'm doing the same, but now I'm telling the people how to use the tools differently. Because just rolling out a technology is one thing, but then changing the habits of the people to use the technology in a different way, that's a complete other thing, and that takes years to do. I mean, they are used to send attachments since 15 years. And now I'm telling them, don't send an attachment. Put it on a OneDrive or on a SharePoint and share it. And by the way, you can then work simultaneously. And it does work. And you can do a link session. Yeah? And you do not have to send an email for each and every nonsense questions you have. Just chat to people. But yeah, but you have to do it really. And we will do it the next couple of years. We will repeat these sessions until we got really the last of our 47,000 employees. And that's key thing. So don't stop with the technology. Start same way with the change management activities. Explain it to the people and do it in person. That's the most powerful tool. I mean, don't send emails or things like that. You have to do these sessions. You have to invite people, get their attention for 1 hour or whatever. And also we've done coaching sessions for our executive management. So top 25 people in the company, we've done one-on-ones. 60 minutes, closed door, 4 eyes only. Now you can ask a really stupid question. You don't want to ask in front of your people. We understand that. Therefore, we send in nice persons, and they ask the really stupid questions. And now they are acting like, they're acting like evangelists for Office 365. So that's very good.
Michelle, I'd love to, because you have this unique environment where you have the enterprise environment still on-prem and the agency environment moving to a cloud service. I'd love to understand, one, how the deployment has affected the agents who you are to some degree taking control of, where they didn't used to have to really worry about you so much, and whether their experiences have influenced those thinking about the enterprise deployment as well.
Yeah, so that's a great question for us. So the feedback that we're getting from our agents that have deployed has been really positive. So they like the fact that it's a more consistent software experience. They like the fact it's a more consistent hardware experience. When you think about the concept of an independently owned agency, the more time they're on the phone with the help desk is less time that they're spending selling insurance or supporting a customer. So one of our main drivers was to reduce the amount of time they were spending supporting their own technology. So we've actually gotten some really good feedback in that context. So they're having to spend less time on the phone. For the most part, what we're seeing is once they go through their deployment activity, if there's any bumps, it bubbles up then. There's usually a technician on site or on the phone with them, so it's something that's resolved very quickly. So from a user perspective, we've gotten pretty positive feedback from them. From an internal support perspective, we're not seeing we did not see a spike in support tickets. So again, a few things with just the deployment itself. But as far as, hey, where do I find this button in Word 2013, we're not seeing that, which, thank goodness, because I don't have a large team. So that's all been very positive. From an enterprise perspective, it's interesting because, again, we're at the very early evaluation stages at some of these cloud technologies. So we're evaluating kind of down 2 tracks. So OneDrive for Business, for example, is something that is further along from an evaluation perspective for our agency force than it is for our enterprise. Just because the cloud presence is already there for agency, it's already kind of a little bit of a known commodity. Where for enterprise, it's really just starting, and it's an interesting dichotomy with the perspective of agent data versus enterprise data and the risk appetite for the two.
So you remain, for lack of a better put it, fighting the battle of risk evaluation associated with 2 different classes of data in your organization. High success in one and still some risk evaluation?
Well, I think we're having success with what we already have in flight. From an enterprise perspective, it's just a little bit of a different facet that we have to look at. So again, just because of the nature of our business, there's a lot of folks that need to look at it and be comfortable with it and really look at this thing and architect what we would want to do and how we would want to engineer it if we go that direction for enterprise.
Okay, yeah, it's a good example of the flexibility of hybrid, or really your ability to do this in pieces and find big wins and successes and move your organization along on the journey.
And it's funny you say that, because with the hybrid installation that we have for agency now, I think that's been one of the things that has kind of relaxed folks a little bit, because most of the cloud presence is around license and subscription management. So the data is still pretty protected, and folks are starting to understand more what the technology looks like.
That's great to hear. It's a good outcome. And then Dave, and then maybe we'll turn it over to the audience after that.
It's kind of a hard question I don't know that we had a lot of skeptics. I mean, I think probably the thing people worried about was the ribbon technology in Office 2013, and about 5 minutes after we deployed, that was not an issue. And so I don't think we've got a bunch of naysayers. The conversation has really changed very quickly into how can we leverage these tools for better business value. And so, we have discussions with one of our plants in North Carolina about how they're changing their quality processes because now they're using OneNote and OneDrive and layering that on top of our mobile devices. So they may be out in the plant with a tablet device, where in the past the quality process would be somebody would go out with a piece of paper, write some stuff down. At the end of the shift, they'd all kind of gather the pieces of paper in a central room in the facility and get a whiteboard together and write it down on a whiteboard. And then they'd have a go meeting, get organized meeting, and they'd stand and look at the whiteboard, right? So that's 8 hours, into the day. Now they're using the tablet devices, Excel spreadsheets, dropping stuff into a OneNote folder on a OneDrive, because the mobile device can get into OneDrive, and that information is visible to the plant throughout the day. So their quality information is there, throughout the shift, throughout the day, and anybody can see it inside the four walls or outside the four walls. Our salespeople are starting to do things differently around the use, again, OneDrive. And for us, OneNote was like one of those hidden gems, the greatest tool that nobody knew of, that was included in our prior versions of Office, but all of a sudden the light bulb came on, and now you show somebody OneNote, and you give them a 30-second demo, and they're a convert. It doesn't take a long discussion. You tell them one or two of the things they could do that they couldn't before, like take your meeting notice and click on the OneNote thing, and it pre-populates that here's what the meeting topic was, here's all the attendees, and now start taking notes. You just start with that, and somebody becomes productive right away. So our conversation is not about what the skeptics thought, because that dissipated within minutes, and it turned very quickly into what can we do with all this new stuff that we spent money on.
That was great to hear. I'm a particular fan of OneNote myself, so I love hearing things like that. So thanks for sort of suffering through my questions. I wanted to give you all an opportunity to stand up and sort of ask your own. You've got 3 customers like yourselves in pretty different industries and different stages of deployment, and anything's fair game. A few Microsoft folks here could help if we need it. So you got there first, so go ahead. Are the mics in the back? These mics on? Yeah. Okay. Cool. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, and then we'll just start circling.
I know moving from Office 2003 to 2013 is kind of a big step, and you touched on it a bit, but you make it sound so easy that the user adoption from 2003 to 2013 was that easy with OneDrive and all the other new tools. How did you handle that other than socializing it just a bit?
In our case, we did a couple things. We went out and bought some of those glossy 4-page foldable things with all the tips by product, and we bought a load of those and we distributed those around. In fact, I learned some things just looking at that. We did take the SCORM files that Microsoft provides in training in English, and we made those available, and we worked with some partners to do some translations into other languages so that those videos were available. And that's, I guess, it shouldn't have surprised us, but a lot of people are using this technology at home, and those are the ones that surprised us, how many of them are saying, this is a piece of cake, because this is what I got on my home PC.
We had similar things. So people complained before, but then they got it, and we got all the e-learnings in the local language, which is key. I mean, when you want to get information out in a country outside your native country, you have to do it in their language, because otherwise, I mean, in Russia, you will find 2% of speaking English. 98% you do not see other people who just speak Russian. So you have to do it in Russian e-learning. Same in Japan or in Latin America and all that stuff. So localizing these e-learnings and all the information, that was also one key to make it really look easy.
One of the major benefits of Office ProPlus is this is the last major upgrade you ever have to do. However, you did mention all those rapid changes that you now, from this point on, you do have your security patches combined with your features, and you have to roll them out every month. Now, do you guys see any problems with third-party products, with vendors? Because, I mean, not all of them ready to convert to, let's say, work 2016, and you will get it as a part of CEU 1 month.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So from what we have deployed thus far with our agency force, we have not seen a great deal of application dependency on third-party apps. We've seen a few Outlook plugins here and there that kind of bubbled up like they always do that doesn't work quite right, and have had to have them disable a few of them just so that the deployment would continue. On the flip side of that, though, we're actually on the enterprise side struggling with that more. So on the enterprise side with full installation and things like that, we're having more of a challenge of third-party applications not working with Office 2013 or beyond because they're not ready yet. So yeah, it continues to be an ongoing challenge. For us, it's interesting to manage deployments in two different ways because on-prem is still on that kind of very rigorous cycle and cadence where the Office deployment to our agency force is on that kind of Microsoft-driven release. Knock on wood, we've not seen any major issues, but we keep monitoring it. Either one of you?
I do want to mention one of the things that I brought up earlier was the shift that we'll be making this year in the release cadence for ProPlus, which will actually allow you to move to a 3 times a year feature update model where in between that you only get security updates and no feature bug fix updates. So that session 20, what was it again? 2207 is a slide deck on exactly the new servicing model we're shifting to later this year.
So it's going to be that's tomorrow, session tomorrow.
No, the session was earlier today, but if you go look up the 2207 session number, you can pull the slides, which has the description of the servicing number. And the speaker for that session is sitting right up here, so you can always find him right after this conversation and talk to him about it. His name is Amesh. He's wearing a black sweater.
Thank you.
Hi. So I work for Heineken, which is also not an IT company. And a lot of the things that you're talking about, I can see it because, like the OneDrive, for example, also releasing it in June. I have a bunch of questions, but I'm just going to take one and take the rest offline. For OneDrive, what's your first line of support going to be? Because OneDrive is out-of-the-box application. I mean, it's not really complicated to support. However, there are some particular questions that I'm getting now. So we released the service a little bit earlier, not officially. And I'm getting some questions that I cannot find it on Q&A, and I'm struggling with that. So that and another topic, training for OneDrive as well. Did you think about that?
Yeah, yes on both topics. So my SharePoint team is responsible for our OneDrive support. It's a similar technology. So one thing there is that we did sign up and got a TAM for our Office 365 environment. So if you're familiar with the TAM setup, we had 2 TAMs. We had a normal TAM for our Microsoft suite, and then we had an Office TAM in the early days, and we've now combined them. So but you still have to buy 2 TAMs. But I would strongly recommend that you get a TAM in that environment because that's your escalation point when you can't get the answers back quickly out of the Microsoft team. But our group handles the frontline questions, and then where we run into bugs or things like that, that's where we engage Microsoft and our TAM gets involved. We did do training around this, so we have created some training modules internally, and the training there is a lot about what you should or should not put in OneDrive, and then a little bit about how to put stuff in OneDrive, and then how to leverage it across your devices. So, there are things within our environment that we don't want to share customer drawings. If we're working with an auto manufacturer on a brand new system that hasn't hit the market yet, and we've got drawings there, we don't want those out in an external cloud environment. So, we want people to be careful not to do that kind of thing. So we've got an education program around what's appropriate to put out there, what's not appropriate, and then how do you put stuff out there and how do you share it?
One very important thing is that you explain your users that the folder shared with everyone means shared with everyone. We had to send out an email to 45,000 users that shared with everyone means shared with everyone. So you would not believe what we found.
Thank you.
Well, I'm probably the only other Lotus Notes user, or maybe there are a few closet people, but Just the one question, and it may not be related exactly to the email migration, is what did you do with the documents and workflows? Because that's part of the stumbling block of getting rid of notes.
Yeah, first of all, we made a decision to keep the Lotus Notes client. That was key. And quite honestly, otherwise it would not work. If you want to get rid of the Lotus Notes client simultaneously rolling out Office 365, that's not working. I mean, even not, we've used Notes for 15 years, 11,000 databases out there and a lot of workflows. So we made the decision, we leave the client, but we scanned all databases to make sure where do we have email workflows, for example, or where do we have calendar stuff in there. We identified these databases, these applications, and for them, we've done a migration path. Funny story, out of 11,000, it was 114 databases we found which had issues.
Oh, okay.
So the number was really, really less than we expected. We thought it would be thousands or things like that. It was 114.
Yeah, we're finding we had hundreds probably originally, but there aren't that many in use, after 10 or 15 years later. So that's helpful, but there's still an issue. Thank you.
I wondered if any of you have had any minority instances around Office 64-bit architecture, and if you've done anything to deal with those situations at all.
So Office 64-bit is always an interesting conversation for us. We actually do not have 64-bit in our agency implementation. We do have some small cases of 64-bit enterprise, very locked down because of the application dependencies as well as the operating system dependencies. So it's not bubbled up in our agency force yet, but if we continue evaluating this for enterprise, I can see where it's going to become a larger conversation for us.
So is it safe to generalize that you're just controlling, 64-bit Office? And
Yes, we tightly control it. So our standard offering is 32-bit, both for our agency deployment and our enterprise deployment. We do have 64 available in the enterprise, but it's a case by case, and you have to really tell us why you need it because we know other things aren't going to work.
Yeah, okay. Great, thank you.
Hi. Marcus, when I'm in the same boat you are in, migrating from Lotus Notes and same time over to Office 365. I had two quick questions. The first one is really related to how the organizational change, you refer to the organizational change and the training. How did you go about getting your users, what kind of tips and techniques did you use to help your users move from one mail system to another?
First of all, we did individual communication. That's one key thing. Despite all the info sessions and marketing, we had an own logo, a slogan, everything. But then, 3 weeks before, we called it the T-3 weeks communication, the person got a personalized email. Hey, you get moved in 3 weeks. And here's the material. Here's the process. Here you can get further information and all that stuff. And then, 2 weeks later, we said, was not joking. 1 week to go. It's really coming. It's about you. You will. So, and then on the day before, we sent out a goodbye email. We're saying, guys, this is the last email you will get. And we sent it out in the evening at 7 p.m. Local time. And next morning, they got their first email in Outlook. Welcome to Outlook, and then they already received their normal emails. So we gave them, we really took them by hand, showed them the e-learnings and all this stuff. But as always, there were a lot of people surprised, like, what happened? Didn't know that, you don't told me, and all that stuff. So yeah, that's the way we did it, really individual communication.
The difference is, in your case, you started with a clean mailbox. A lot of folks started with a clean mailbox. That does not fly in my organization. So
why?
Well, I'm the same thing that Michelle is in. I'm in insurance. It will not fly. So
yeah, but we had similar discussions, and then I always ask where is the law?
It's not the law. It's actually the behavior and the thinking within the company.
That's it. Because after all this discussion, it came out there is no law.
Yeah.
It's just we don't want it.
Yes.
So what I did, before we start the project, I went to our CEO. And I had a 1-hour demonstration because that was the way how we solved the project. I've done to my 5 board members, individual presentation, demonstration. And then I asked him, you know, we can do both ways, this and this. These are the pros and cons. And he said, no, let's go for clean mailbox. And if you have any issue, just refer to me.
Okay.
That was a golden ticket. And each time when I
I'm glad for you, but not happy for me.
I think we all aspire to Marcus's bravery. And we aspire to your bravery.
The second quick question was, we're also an organization that's kind of a meeting culture. We meet a lot with a lot of invites all over the place. What we wanted to find out was the issues you all had with calendaring. You know, I don't know whether I can potentially, what challenges did you run into, or did you?
We had a lot of issues with calendar stuff. I mean, as I mentioned it before, or room booking. It's a nightmare.
Yeah.
I mean, room booking databases from Lotus Notes, puts them on Outlook. I mean, that was a nightmare. But we informed the people, yes, it could happen that when you attend a meeting, there are a double booking. Deal with it. It's the way it will happen. But quite honestly, it ran quite smooth. But calendar entries is an issue, so we informed the people about that.
Yeah.
And we told them, and especially the assistant to executive management. I mean, these are the key power users. You know that. So we did extra sessions with them and said, okay, maybe you proactively just do a new invitation for the Jure fix.
Yeah.
So please, yes, it's a little bit of work, but you have to do it, but then you're done.
So you essentially, did you all stop the repeat meetings? Did you have them set up separate? We're thinking about stopping the repeat meetings.
Yes.
And having them set up separate meetings.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So we asked, so for the key meetings, to make sure, just set them new up.
Okay.
Delete the old ones and make new things. You may want to add a link meeting, because we have a similar meeting culture.
Yeah.
Everything in person.
Yeah.
And that's the way I would do it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hi, I was wondering, I guess if you could talk a little bit about your experience or thoughts with assigning users like E1 versus E3 licenses, and maybe whether or not decisions between them using the click-to-run version and Office Online for companies that kind of need to stay cost-conscious on the cost differences between those licenses.
Yeah, so for us, we actually negotiated. So all of our Office 365 users have the same type of license. So we have the same pool. Everybody's getting the same license. We actually kind of reduced that confusion or that conflict. For us, though, with the click-to-run, again, while we are click-to-run, while we're going through the deployment and the installation, our on-site technicians have the install files on a USB stick. Again, we don't know what we're going to find when it comes to internet speeds, connectivity, things like that. Once an agency location is converted, though, if they were to replace a machine in the future, need to do some sort of remote deployment, then they still have access to the click-to-run deployment from the cloud tenant or from the hosted location.
I guess, but are there users that just exclusively use Office Online and not even get the click-to-run version?
Not at this time for us.
But you are, am I mistaken, your agents are using Outlook Web app?
Yeah, they're
for
using
email.
Outlook Web
They're using the
Access.
web
They do
client.
not have the full Outlook client yet. That's one of our future plans.
Okay, thanks.
So you're a mix right now. You have rich Word, Excel, and PowerPoint desktop apps, but the Outlook web app for email. Yeah.
Yeah. We're much like Allstate in the sense that we picked the E3 license and we're just using E3. We do have like kiosk setups within many of our plants. We ended up staying with traditional licensing on those and not brought those in under the Office 365 program at all. It's just it was too complicated with the licensing scheme. So for those, we've left kiosks with traditional licensing.
Okay, thanks.
In terms of the Office suite, there's a couple of options for deployment, including SCCM and what else you have. What was your preferred way to deploy the Office suite and why? Would you do it differently if you're given another chance to do it again? That's pretty much my question.
So we had a mature SCCM environment,
Yep.
doing a lot of inventory and an extensive amount of distribution. So we were using that to stage the files, and we also made use of click to run. And no, I wouldn't change that. It worked very well for us.
And for us, very similarly, we have a very robust SCCM presence for enterprise, but because of the scope of this was for agency where they are not domain joined, is why we made the decision to go with the click to run installation. It made more sense for us.
What would you recommend for companies that do not have SCCM and who do not wish to implement SCCM for the Office Suite deployment?
What do you have? What do you have?
But just for this instance, let's say the customer has nothing.
So we used LANdesk for the rollout.
Okay.
Worked fine.
So the party app?
Pardon?
The party?
Yeah,
the
third party. Yeah, third party. So it worked as well. But quite honestly, now even in the future, I would. That's something I would change. I was not very happy with LANdesk, but nothing against LANdesk, but for this particular rollout, so I may in the future will go your way as well.
Okay. Last question. What challenges did you have when you use SCCM for the deployment?
I can't think of any. I mean, it worked just as we had planned. Now, one thing to keep in mind about the updates, at least the way it works right now, if I understand it correctly, it's not partial updates to the Office 365 client. Mm-hmm. You get a whole client overlay again. So, so that back to Marcus's comment about network, just be thinking about that. Yeah. Making sure you've got network in place.
Thank you.
Hi, I will say we're working on the Delta updates actively, so the bandwidth constraints aren't as substantial. Yes, absolutely. These will be our last two questions. We have a few more minutes, and I'm sure folks will hang around afterwards.
Thanks. So I'm wondering if you guys had any issues with VBA code or any plugins, old legacy plugins as well. We seem to have a lot of those.
So if you're using SAP and you may know BEX Analyzer, does someone use BEX Analyzer? Just run. I mean, this is a nightmare. This was the biggest nightmare we had, was the Excel plugins. And we still have some business processes who rely on a very, very old BEX Analyzer version. And I think there are 4 or 5 versions out there. We had them all. Yeah, you too. And for them, we then had a virtual to Excel 2007, for example, as a workaround. We still not fixed it finally. So they're still using this very old BEX Analyzer. But we told them, okay, you got now 3 more years. That's it, but then it's up to you.
So you gave them virtual.
Yeah, we gave the virtualized version, but even that in some cases did not work. Then we did a parallel installation. So we rolled out 2013, and in addition, we rolled out 2007. Unfortunately, our old 2003 package was created in 2003. And it was so intelligent, each time when a new software came in, it was, it deleted it automatically. So we had to remove the old 2003 first, install 2013, and then in addition we installed, for example, 2007 because of some stupid BEX Analyzer.
So did any of you have to do parallel installs at the other companies? And if you didn't, how effective were you at removing the old version of Office and not having any file association issues?
Yeah, so for us, we have not had to do any parallel installations within the agency force. We are working on some stuff in the enterprise, which is turning out to be interesting because of the BEX Analyzer, so thank you for bringing that trauma back to mind. So that's exactly right. The add-ins and the plugins continue to be a challenge. For our agency installation, we've not done any parallel or any side-by-side. We have run into some challenges for those agencies where they have an older version of Office on their machine with trying to get it completely uninstalled so that Office ProPlus installs cleanly. So there are times where we've actually had to get on the phone with those on-site technicians and walk them through some different processes to get the bits out. It did 99% of the time. So, but again, every now and then you get those odd little plugins and add-ins, and Agent X over here in Wisconsin did something really wacky. So those are the ones where we occasionally get escalated to us to clean up.
Suggesting to clear off plugins and then run the install.
But the click to run is supposed to coexist in a VM, and you shouldn't have to uninstall any of those
Yeah, and like I said, for the most part, the click-to-run has been very, very clean for us, and again, carrying around the installation files on a USB just for the network connection. Again, occasionally we run across one of those situations where there's something unusual on a machine that requires some remediation.
Nothing to add.
Okay, it's more of an operational question. How well does Microsoft filter spam?
How well do they what?
Filter spam, and how much control do you have on whitelist, and how fast does that turn around? I mean,
I'd say it's a little less robust than what we've been using on premise, and we've been working with the Microsoft team to do some tuning and tweaking. You know, there've been some. My inbox has seen, you know, maybe half dozen, you know, more spams in the course of 2 or 3 days than I would usually see. So it's not bad, but it's not quite as good as I'm used to, and I think they're getting better at that.
What I think is that the spam industry gets better. That's my issue. I mean, so because you get so much personalized spam. I don't know how it is here. It's like, oh, dear Marcus, you as a corporate director at Henkel. How do you know that all that stuff? So these folks are getting much better. So a lot of more spam.
what type of controls do you have on cranking the scoring or whatever, and then whitelisting after that?
I have not the detail, to be honest.
You should. I mean, I'm glad to walk with you down to the booth and bring you to the exchange guys that will talk you through, because we do actually have fairly robust controls now sitting in there as far as whitelisting, and also just in customization of rules, either server side or absorbing the client side rules in Outlook that users are setting. So the users can mark things as spam, but then you can get those applied at the server side. So I'm glad I can help connect you to the right folks. But we are out of time, so I wanted to thank Marcus, Michelle, and Dave really for spending the time to help you all out, and thank you all for spending the time with us. Really appreciate it.